What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Swan Signal Live. I'm your host, Sam Callahan, Senior Analyst at Swan Bitcoin. Before we get into today's show, I want to bring up some of our sponsors. The first is Cloaked Wireless, which is a privacy-focused provider where you can pay with Bitcoin. They are your best protection against SIM swaps. I know a lot of Bitcoiners who suffer from these, so it's important to get protection, and Cloaked Wireless is the answer. It is a company created by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners, whether it's to secure your primary phone number or a low secondary secure SIM. Everyone should protect themselves from SIM swaps. So check it out by using Cloaked. You can get 25% off using the discount code SWAN. And the other is Marathon Digital Holdings, which is the largest and most technologically advanced publicly traded Bitcoin miner, as well as one of the most energy efficient. Marathon's primary mission is to enhance the Bitcoin network through sustainably increasing the amount of hash rate, which helps make Bitcoin the world's most decentralized and secure monetary network. So check out Marathon Digital Holdings today. And today, got a great guest on the show. He's been in Bitcoin for a long time, and he is now focused on what I think is the most important topic when it comes to Bitcoin, which is Bitcoin used as a tool for financial freedom, for individual empowerment. And we're going to bring on CK from the Human Rights Foundation. He is the Director of Financial Freedom, which is, I think, the most badass title I've heard. So welcome, CK.
Thanks for having me on, Sam. And exciting stuff going on with the show. It seems like y'all are always growing, so always honored to be on.
Yeah, man. So let's talk a little bit about your, transition. You spent a lot of years at Bitcoin Mag and done some great work in Bitcoin throughout the years. I've learned from you. Recently transitioned to a role at the Human Rights Foundation. So maybe, why did you make that transition? What attracted you to the job? And give us a little bit about your day-to-day there, what you're working on.
Yeah. Well, I'd been at Bitcoin Magazine for almost 6 years, and things were going really well there. And there's a lot of great teammates on the team that were, kind of like growing and taking up responsibility. And I just felt like it was time to do something new in the space. And started, kind of talking to folks, and Gladstein said, "You got to come here." And he recruited me hard at that point. But you know, a big reason why I took the role is because I saw the narratives that were coming out of HRF and Alex Gladstein's works, and I thought, wow, those are the most ironclad narratives in Bitcoin. So something that you kind of like talked about at the beginning, the human rights improvements that come from people adopting Bitcoin are massive. When you think of freedom of speech and many of the other freedoms that Westerners really have pride in, none of that is possible without freedom of transaction. So if you say the wrong thing, if you can't continue to make transactions and you can't continue to use the banking system or electronic payment system, then all of a sudden those freedoms stop really mattering. So it's a really big deal that Bitcoin exists. It's a big deal for human rights, and it's awesome being at HRF and having that be one of HRF's focuses is improving, supporting, and integrating Bitcoin as much as possible into what they're doing.
Yeah, I think that point is kind of lost on people sometimes. I'm actually doing a presentation at Freedom Fest in Las Vegas next week on this exact topic of how the
Cool.
freedom of transaction it's a prerequisite for a lot of these other fundamental freedoms. If you just think about our modern world, if I can't pay to afford my cell phone to talk to people in this day and age, I mean that hurts my freedom of speech, right? Or if I can't pay to assemble and to protest because I can't coordinate, I can't do anything. It's how, or freedom of movement, right? Like affording like a bus ticket. If you can't do any of those things, it all starts with the freedom of transaction or financial freedom. And we're starting to see like more controls be placed on, fiat currencies in certain jurisdictions. Do you guys see stories of how Bitcoin, I assume at Human Rights Foundation, you guys hear a lot of stories of how Bitcoin's being used to circumvent capital controls? What are some like stories that have really shine bright in your mind in terms of how Bitcoin is being used as a tool for freedom?
Yeah, I mean, look, I just want to bring up a resource that we put together every single week. It's called the Financial Freedom Report. And pretty much every single week, we bring 5+ news stories around financial freedom globally. So that can be, this country took this IMF loan, or this country suspended someone's bank account for these reasons. So we report on this on a daily basis, or sorry, on a weekly basis. Island Rosario and or Osario and Zach Gerard, who are on our content team, they put in a lot of work to make this like really, really top notch. And I know that a lot of really prominent Bitcoiners already subscribe to it just because of the information that we're pulling up every single week. So here, instead of me like just kind of giving a run of the mill, answer, I kind of want to pull up and see if I can find
Yeah.
this week's report. It hasn't come out yet, but I have the just the pre kind of the draft for it. So give me 1 second.
So we get a little preview.
Yeah, exactly.
Exclusive preview. I actually subscribe to that, and it's an incredible work that they do.
All right. So coming up this week, we're going to be talking about Kenya and how the protests have led to a reversal in kind of the increased tax plan that gotten things really riled up there. We're going to talk about Burma and bans on the use of VPNs, which kind of give a lot of people their access to crypto and other services that are outside of their walled garden. Talk about an attempted coup and economic distress in Bolivia. Do a deep dive on that. So a lot of big stuff. Another one. This is in Gaza. Bitcoin donations go straight to a taxi driver, this guy named Yusuf Muhammad, who is using Bitcoin to help generate support directly on the ground. So we're covering everything across the board, and that's just kind of like a preview of what's in upcoming this week. I guess it's should be dropping tomorrow. I don't know if they're going to drop it on July 4th. I guess maybe they should if it's ready, but they pretty much do the newsletter every single week, no matter what, even if it's a holiday.
That's amazing. I mean, it's just amazing to hear those stories, both to understand the problem that Bitcoin solves and then actual case studies of how it's doing that. And yeah, I think I was in BTC Prague, and I was talking to Mickey from Geyser Fund. And I believe that's how that taxi driver in Gaza was able to get some Bitcoin and stuff like that. So he was telling me all about it. And I was like, these are the kind of stories
They have
that
lots of
matter.
stories.
Yeah, I know. These are the kind of stories that matter, It's how else were they to get funding to pay for essentials in that war-torn country? And Bitcoin comes in and is used as a tool, right? I mean, it just helps things. It's a way to kind of help a really dire situation. And so Human Rights Foundation, you guys not only build awareness around some of the problems with the traditional financial system, but also, and the whole world really, but also how Bitcoin kind of solves that. But you guys also fund Bitcoin development, right? So I think in the spring, Human Rights Foundation granted like $500,000 to 14 or 15 Bitcoin projects around the world. How do you guys think about like open source development and how to fund it? And why have you guys taken up kind of almost like a leadership position in that role of funding these projects?
Yeah, I mean, great question. Ultimately, a lot of what we're doing on the financial freedom side is, credit to Alex Gladstein and his vision. But really, the Bitcoin open source development ecosystem is growing every single day, and it's getting better and better. And there's a lot of amazing orgs that are doing a lot of different things and have a lot their own niches in terms of supporting open source Bitcoin development. Where HRF kind of fits into that puzzle is, one, we support a lot of kind of upstart projects. So where someone like a Brink is looking to hire a full-time experienced Bitcoin core developer, we are giving support to a lot of newer things that have not yet necessarily been proven out, based on proof of work, based on good proposals being sent to us, based on what we're seeing out in the ecosystem. So that's one of our key differentiators is, we're really trying to help a lot of these folks get started, and then maybe they move on to an OpenSats grant, or maybe they move on to, getting a full-time job with one of the development shops. or maybe they start a business in the space. So, there's a lot of kind of different avenues in which the Bitcoin Development Fund grants can help. Also, kind of, we have expanded beyond just open source development. We also support community and educational efforts. A lot of folks don't think about this, but I open my favorite Bitcoin wallet on my iPhone, and that wallet is in English, or maybe they offer a couple of languages, but most of the time it's in English. Imagine that you're Russian, or imagine that you're Chinese and you're opening that wallet and you can't access it. So, looking towards, how can we support translations? How can we support accessibility? How can we get the content? Swan, you're making a lot of amazing content. How do we get that into as many different languages? So we support a lot of translating efforts globally. We also support Bitcoin conferences globally. So, we're going to be at the Bitcoin conference later this month. We're going to be at Pacific Bitcoin. We are supporting or have a hand in a lot of the different events happening globally, especially the ones that are happening in totalitarian areas, in terms of enabling them to, tell the human rights narrative and help their event be successful. So we're trying to get as many, kind of community and education and accessibility touch points out there for HRF's target audience, which is these people who are fighting and resisting authoritarians, and they need the financial freedom that Bitcoin provides right now versus they have a choice per se.
Mm-hmm. So you brought up like the problem of an app being all English and somebody in one of these jurisdictions that needs Bitcoin, can't understand the app. What are some other, maybe some feedback that you hear about how Bitcoin can be improved as a tool for, financial freedom? What are some of the limitations right now that people are running into, or barriers that makes it more difficult for people to use it? Because I think as a community, those are the kind of constructive feedback that we want to hear so that we can build. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think like the language in app is actually, or in wallet is actually way bigger than most people think. Most wallets that give you you can set up your Univ account as USD, BTC, the yuan, whatever they give you all those options. But when it comes to changing the language, it becomes a barrier. And just to kind of like personify it for you, both of us live in the US. Imagine the best Bitcoin wallet existed. This is the perfect wallet, has every feature you can imagine. It's rock solid, but it's all Mandarin. Like, are you going to use that wallet?
Mm-mm.
So,
No,
I
I
mean,
wouldn't.
this is
Yeah.
a situation that we're dealing with globally. So that's a big one, honestly. And I'm hoping to organize even more efforts to solve that. Getting education and stuff like that translated is one thing. Getting the app developers to manage changes within their app is a whole nother thing. So that's one. The other thing is the last mile problem. So I don't know, have you guys discussed this with your audience before on the show?
No, let's get into it.
So this is something everyone's super familiar with, right? Like, someone buys Bitcoin, someone receives Bitcoin, and then they're like, all right, well, if I need to leverage this value, how do I use it, right? Like, how do I buy stuff with it? So that's the last mile problem, right? So you can be across the planet, you can be taken off of your financial system, and then I can get you to download a wallet and I can send you value super, super easily. What's the problem? The next step, right, is what do they do with that money? How do they get comfortable with the P2P ecosystem? How do they get comfortable with living on gift cards? How do they get comfortable with how do they find local money changers? How do they get their local fiat and where they live? All these things, like, that's the last mile problem. And I mean, I think there's a lot of great entrepreneurs trying to solve it. It's being solved in a decentralized way. It's also something that comes with Bitcoin's maturity, right? I just think
Yeah.
we're that early that Bitcoin's just not mature yet, and we're pushing the boundaries, right? We're telling people, hey, you don't have any other electronic payments infrastructure, money infrastructure. Bitcoin can do that right now, but obviously we try to be realistic too. But so between like the languages on wallet, and then finding more and more creative solutions to the last mile problem and helping people get liquidity with their Bitcoin easier across the globe, those are some of the big things that can make our work easier in terms of getting more people to adopt it in terms of their fight for liberty.
Yeah, it's the last mile problem. I mean, that's a tough problem to solve. I mean, does it just come with Bitcoin's maturity, do you think, as the network effect grows, more adoption, the Bitcoin itself becomes more sellable in the economies?
Yeah.
Or do you think there's efforts that we can do? Is it education? Is it just being like a marketplace to connect people? You say it's happening in a decentralized way. Like how else can we kind of address this problem? Because I agree. I think that's definitely a barrier for people.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like just understanding it in a thoughtful way and like thinking and acknowledging it as a real struggle for adoption now beyond people who have the choice to invest and the choice to accumulate capital. I think it's a big deal. It's one of the things that is really necessary for Bitcoin to become a complete solution for money. But like, I would say just acknowledging it and thinking about it and trying to solve it like that is probably the most that we can do. Beyond that, like you said, it is a maturity thing. I think y'all at Swan do a really great chart where it's like it has like three different adoption curves, right? One of them is store value, the next one is medium
Yeah.
of exchange, and then the last one is unit of account. And like that's probably a pretty good mental model to think about it. If I were to add any of my own kind of thought to that, is I would say it doesn't really make sense for merchants to adopt Bitcoin in mass because from the perspective that people are going to spend their Bitcoin super willingly. I think the incentive for merchants to adopt Bitcoin kind of like in a bigger scale is that merchants actually want and appreciate and desire Bitcoin. So they're going to be demanding it for their goods, similar to like a lot of merchants would prefer to take cash than other payment options. They'll say, I'll give you a discount for this, or it's cash only, or whatever. I think that's where the merchant values Bitcoin, that's when you're going to really see this tipping point in terms of a lot of people. There's a lot of, kind of day to day liquidity on Bitcoin.
Yeah, a lot of times these merchants it's like incentives, right? They don't want to deal with the high fees of the ACH system, so they go cash only. Or, I actually read the Reserve Bank of India, so they're trying to roll out their CBDC. And what happened was there was a tax put on other payment rails, which actually pushed adoption towards CBDCs because they would be desperate for merchant adoption, right? For these
Yeah,
CBDCs to get proper uptake. So they taxed other payment rails. So the merchants basically were pushed into the CBDC and it kind of worked. So I think that might be a framework that might come in the future. But you guys, speaking of,
totally.
yeah, I mean, you guys spoke on you guys have a CBDC tracker. So any thoughts on that, or like, have you guys been tracking that? Because I know they just put out a survey, and how much do you guys think at the Human Rights Foundation that this is a threat to human rights that everyone should be aware of?
Yeah, so at the past Oslo Freedom Forum, earlier this month, we actually had a full exhibit displaying our CBDC tracker. And really, one of my big focuses right now, my day to day, is how do we get this CBDC tracker in front of as many eyes as possible, and that honestly requires a lot of SEO work. So I'm kind of heads down on that these days. But
Mhm.
the CBDC tracker is so important because on a weekly monthly basis we have resources going towards keeping up with everything that's happening with CBDCs globally. So if you actually click in on that link that is being shared here, cbdctracker.hrf.org, you're going to be able to look at an entire globe, and the globe has every single country color coded based on three different kind of buckets of CBDC progress. And if you look at it, it's almost like 85% of all countries are experimenting with CBDCs. HRF personally, our organization, our official stance is that most likely CBDCs are tools of control and tools of censorship. I think there are edge cases where maybe a Western nation comes up with like a good CBDC, relatively speaking, in terms of privacy and not requiring it, like being cash like rather than a surveillance app. And we're very skeptical, whereas there are other trackers online that their perspective on CBDCs is that CBDCs are like innovation and money, net good and they're open to it, and they're seeing it as innovation. So, generally speaking, we're very suspicious at the HRF, and we think that the conversation amongst the public across the globe is not nearly, enough to fit, the amount of activity that's happening amongst central banks globally, many of which are authoritarian regimes that are really pushing this forward. But there's a lot of acceptance from the West as well. So really, really important resource. And yeah, I mean, look, I don't think that CBDCs stand a chance, but a lot of people can get hurt on the way to these different countries trying to get them adopted. So, you brought up an example of um, a country that started taxing India, starting to tax non-CBDC transactions to promote their CBDC. That's kind of like the nice way of doing it. If you are Nigeria, what you do is you promote the CBDC, and then you do a cash redesign that has to go out in I think like a month or 2 months, something like that. Not nearly enough time, and you also run out of cash. But you effectively coerce people into giving up their cash savings for new cash savings. That process breaks, and then you say, well, hey, you can also sign up for this CBDC to claim your money. And a lot of people got hurt from that, and it turned into a massive, S show, if you will. But these countries are going to be playing around with people's savings in order to try to get them onto these rails that they control at the central bank level, on the tech level. And we think that a lot of bad can come from that. So that's why we do the CBDC tracker. And again, that's why I'm spending a lot of my time trying to get it in front of as many people as possible.
Yeah, Nigeria has been an S show. That's for sure. I mean, I think CBDC pilot that is launched has seen very minimal uptake. Besides, maybe you can argue China, but obviously that's literally forced on them. They don't really have an option, right? And that's kind of maybe
I'm
that's
not bullish
proof
on
right
them,
there. No, I'm not
but
bullish on them either.
sometimes the medicine hurts, while they're trying to make you take it, if you will.
Yeah, man, I mean, we can go the Bank of India, the same one that I just mentioned. So one of the things that's interesting about a CBDC is that when even the central banks themselves lay out the risks of all the risks that are potential, even outside of human rights risks, but actual like financial stability of disintermediating the banks. And what they
It's
do
a big
though,
deal.
yeah, what they're trying to do is put limits on the CBDCs, which obviously is an issue of itself. It's like built-in capital controls from the beginning, because they don't want too much of the bank deposits getting sucked out of the banks and into these CBDCs. So they're going to put limits on them, which is hysterical because that defeats its purpose as like a efficient form of payments if there's built-in limits. But also, this is why I bring up the Bank of India. That's been live for a while, and they have the limits. And one of the big takeaways from this National Bureau of Economic Research study was that they still saw significant bank disintermediation even with the limits. So I'm not bullish on CBDCs. I think they're going to be a complete disaster, both from a human rights standpoint, but also I think they're going to wreak havoc on the banking industry. And so it's just not a good idea. Like so I really applaud you guys for raising awareness because I don't think the public discussion is enough. It has increased
No.
over the years, but it's still just like they're still just trolling along. And even like another thing I looked at, I mean, I've done a lot of research into this, was they do public discussions. They have like public periods for public comment periods. And every one of the public comments are just like, we don't want this. We don't want this. This is bad for our privacy. This is surveillance. I went through all of them. And the central banks just say, wow, that was a record response. This is a positive, they don't say like what is actually in the responses. They just quantify it as like, that was the largest response we've ever got. We're going to continue with our work, right?
It's a good sign.
Extremely disingenuous, extremely just disingenuous. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
everyone
tough
should check
stuff,
that
man.
out. Like I applaud you guys for raising awareness about that. But the other thing that's interesting is in Nigeria, that's where we see significant uptake in Bitcoin as well. And so like maybe that's another reason why you're not bullish is that Bitcoin exists, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I threw a link into the chat here, but I personally do not think that central banks can compete with Bitcoin.
Hmm.
And in my article, I like laid out from just, no emotions, no, they're evil, whatever. Just really simple. Bitcoin is open and permissionless architecture outcompetes central bank top-down architecture. The user-centric monetary policy in Bitcoin of 21 million hard cap is something that only Bitcoin has been able to achieve, and there's a lot of historical precedent showing that central banks will likely never adopt such a user-centric monetary policy, nor can they achieve such a user-centric monetary policy. There's pretty much been, 100% failure rate on that front. And then, the last, sorry, these ads are like popping up in front of me. And also Bitcoin has a first mover advantage. If you think about all of these different CBDCs, like they have to get adoption. You know how hard we work on getting Bitcoin adoption, right? Like all of these CBDCs also have to do that hard work. Obviously, governments, generally speaking, have points of leverage and violence on top of their educational efforts. But adoption is not easy. It's definitely not easy, and it can often be painful if there's coercion involved. So I think Bitcoin just has a head start. We have a nation state that has it as legal tender. We have many other nation states either embracing mining as something that helps their grid and or doing it themselves. There's a lot more organic adoption already of Bitcoin and the stable coins, the greater open source permissionless ecosystem of crypto that's already launched, versus a lot of these stable coins are in beta, they're in pilot, they're rolling them out slowly, they're not even launched yet. So I think if you just look at these three factors, like there's going to be a lot of taxpayer money wasted and a lot of debt taken out wasted on these projects.
Yeah.
And then, Bitcoin is the internet of money, and it's just kind of chugging along, and it's just going to be more useful. It's going to be more accessible. It's going to be better. Bitcoin's global. It solves a problem in that it's global. And then all of these, like 100% of these CBDCs are going to be wall gardened, right? So they're really just not even competing.
I think those are all fantastic points. I mean, people don't understand the open source nature of Bitcoin and how it's all interoperable, of how important that is, because that's been the problem with global payments the whole time, is that they're siloed, and the CBDCs don't fix that. And they're going to try, though. They're going to try. That's why they're creating this one ledger to rule them all with the biz, because they're trying to make it all interoperable with all the different CBDCs. Now, the problem is that just is trying to do more centralization, and somebody controls that one ledger, and it's going to be these unelected organizations like the Bank of International Settlements. That's going to be the one at the top of that little pyramid, right? And so they're almost trying to, the whole system needs to centralize and centralize and centralize to try to compete with these new technologies that are decentralized, that are growing organically. And their solution is to centralize even further. And I think that just leads to, potential human rights abuses, potential like financial abuses. And so I agree completely with everything you just said in terms of why Bitcoin's different and why it has a huge head start, because I don't really see it. I don't really see people adopting it in mass. And I think the pilot studies that have been out have all been complete failures, except unless you're just going to go complete China. If that's the world we're going in, the Western democracies are just turning into complete China's, where they're going to just like rule with an iron fist and make people do it. That's the only way I see like adoption really taking hold. Or if they give like a huge cherry on top, where they like give a huge stimmies, like they'll probably do something like that as well. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, every single trick that Bitcoin companies have been trying to get people, and even S coins promoters have been trying to get people to adopt their thing. The nation state will also do those things. The roadmap is already out there. Airdrops, bonuses, whatever. Honestly, the vaccine playbook is probably going to be pretty similar too, and probably shouldn't say that just because who knows what YouTube will do. But like, hey, get your free burger if you do this thing, if you get this airdrop from us. So like we're going to see that all over again. That stuff almost never works. Nothing replaces like the real quality of a product. And I think that's like the idea behind why I don't think these things can compete against Bitcoin. With that being said, if central banks try to enforce these bad ideas, it's going to cause pain, and that's what HRF is really flagging.
Yeah. Yeah, and I said like I don't know if the U.S. was smart, because you hear this narrative a lot of, we can't fall behind China. Look at them; they're all developing them. You can't fall behind them. But I'm always like, we should just be like, good, go waste all your resources and money, on these stupid projects, and why don't we just embrace Bitcoin? That's one way where we could completely
Yeah.
separate ourselves, right? Like, keep wasting all your time and resources building these silly centralized CBDCs, and then we'll embrace this new monetary technology.
I think you're 100% right, and the key is our leaders and our business people need to embrace Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
They need to stop trying to emulate China. If you go to the CBDC tracker, you can look at there's this big chunk. It's India, China, Russia, Kazakhstan, or Iran, all right next to each other. Like, that's the circle of pain right there. That's where CBDCs are, are being deployed. They're actually being deployed, whether it's small pilots or they're actually putting them in the banking system, etc. So we don't want to emulate that in the West. And I would say, like, probably citizens of those places, they would envy having, access to Bitcoin and having access to better investments and better money. So, um, I would say, Sam, you're right, and I really hope that the leaders in the West don't try to copy some of these authoritarians, and they embrace Bitcoin. And Gladstein, my boss, he's the CSO at HRF. He wrote a really great article. This is kind of oriented towards Americans, but 4th of July is tomorrow. It's a good time to bring it back up. Bitcoin has a lot of American independent liberty values, and it has a lot of the values that are in the Constitution kind of ingrained in it. And I think that that's something that, people in the West should start seeing and appreciating, that this is actually a reflection of our ideals. And it actually enforces them in an amazingly elegant way that's very good at shipping it across the globe. Right. So if we want our ideals to be shipped across the globe instead of the CBDC, we need to embrace Bitcoin.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I've heard people say Bitcoin is as American as apple pie. And I agree. The values are super aligned. Property rights, freedom of speech. You can just go down the list. Individual freedoms. So I agree, man. I agree. And one of the things that I think HRF does well is it just kind of supports builders. And you guys just launched the Finney Freedom Prize, which I think was a badass name in honor of Hal Finney. So tell us a little bit about that and how maybe somebody could win that if they're a builder themselves.
Sorry, I'm finding the mute button. Yeah, no. So Finney Freedom Prize, if you go to, I'll throw the link in here. It's finneyprize.org. It'll take you to our page. But effectively, this is the third HRF prize. So we have the Talani Maseko Prize. We have the Havel Prize. Those are oriented towards leadership in fighting authoritarians and art and protest against authoritarians. And now we have the Finney Freedom Prize. So all three of these prizes are named after the first laureate, as well as the someone who is very well known and very respected in the relative kind of sphere of the prize. So we think that there's no one more universally loved, cherished, or important in early Bitcoin and today as Hal Finney. And we are super honored to be able to align with the Finney family in order to honor Hal, as well as name the prize after Hal, and inspire the purpose of the prize with his vision. So, Hal believed that, the computers and technology can be a tool for liberation and freedom. He was deeply invested in moving forward e-cash as a concept. And then when Bitcoin came out, he was really the first fan and the first user that pushed it forward. When you look back at the archives, Satoshi released Bitcoin to, kind of a very niche news mailing list of probably the only people on the planet that would actually care about. It's a cryptography mailing list. And it was met with a lot of people saying it's a bad idea. One of the very few people who's saying it's a bad idea and actually worked on it before it was released is Hal Finney. So the role he played in actually supporting electronic cash as it became reality is absolutely momentous. And then, beyond that, just his history with PGP, et cetera, it's just amazing. So Hal Finney is the best person that we could have aligned this prize with. It sounds amazing. Finney Freedom Prize. It's as it was supposed to happen. And in terms of who can win it, if you go to the site, we have a board. That board selects the winner or selects a short list of laureates for any given halving epoch. They're judging the potential winners based on who has done the most for freedom through Bitcoin in any given halving period. So Hal, we determined, was a person who did the most from the beginning of Bitcoin in 2012. So the next award is going to be for 2012 to 2016. And our goal is to catch up to the current halving by this next halving. And then the next halving will release the winner of who did the most for Bitcoin from 2024 until 2028 at the 2028 halving. And each winner is selected by a different committee. So we have the Genesis committee. They're going to help us catch up. And then from there, the Genesis committee selects, who precedes them on the committee. Each individual selects the person who's going to precede them. Each committee from that point on, they will select, one halving period's winner. And then they will select their who's going to precede them. And then it's on to the next one. So one very cool thing about this prize is that every winner gets 1 Bitcoin. And we have pre-funded that prize all the way from now until the end of all halvings in approximately 2140, but we don't know exactly what it'll hit. So that is 34 Bitcoin total. We've disseminated one of them, or have earmarked one of them for the cause, the ALS cause of Fran Finney's choice. And there's 33 more Bitcoins in a Bitcoin address that is viewable on finneyprice.org for people who want to see the proof of reserve. So just kind of showing how Bitcoin changes the games for these kind of initiatives, as well as, we think this could be one of the most important prizes in the world if Bitcoin does what we think it's going to do. So, in 2140, this may be the most sought after prize, ever.
Most lucrative,
so
maybe.
We'll see. And it, for sure could potentially be, if Bitcoin does what we think it could do, it could, the prize will be more than all of the Bitcoin that's released in the halving of that entire halving period. So and that happens, way before then. But
yeah,
kind of the game theory around the prize kind of gets pretty crazy.
Yeah, that's cool. It's cool thinking about who might win the previous epochs too. There should be like prediction markets on it.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Someone should start that.
Yeah, someone should start that. Yeah, but I that's great. It's a great idea. Excited. I think it's going to incentivize people to do what's right for Bitcoin, open source software, but also for financial freedom. So it's awesome. It's an awesome thing. So go check it out if you're interested in learning more. And the last thing I just want to talk to you about is just, you've been in Bitcoin for a long time, and when you look at Bitcoin right now, I think people are seeing it kind of chop sideways. Like they're wondering where we are in the cycle. There's all this speculation. How are you feeling? How are you feeling about, the prospects right now and all these recent developments compared to maybe previous cycles, your just experience, what's your gut feeling? Tell us a little bit, man. Just want to get in your head a little bit.
Yeah, well, people know that I'm always very bullish, so nothing changes there. But part of that bullishness just, kind of goes into my mental models of how Bitcoin adoption happens. I think that they're pretty well aligned with what we're seeing, as well as just general long-term thinking around Bitcoin. So, I think of Bitcoin in terms of like these cycles. And, if you were to think about, hey, the prehistory of Bitcoin is between now and all the halvings being over, we're not even at close to the beginning. We've done 4 halvings. There's going to be 33 total. Sorry, 33 total, including the one where we go from 1 Satoshi block subsidies to 0 Satoshis. So, that long-term thinking helps me stay bullish, because when I think of Bitcoin, I think of its adoption in terms of it is a paradigm shift in money. and it is a new protocol for value communications for humans, and one that takes time, but two, the changes are so massive that none of us can actually be bullish enough. None of us can like think through, if you live in a world before electrification, it's impossible for you to have been bullish enough on electrification. So I think like Bitcoin is that kind of a paradigm shift. So I'm always staying super bullish. When it comes to right now, when I look at, Bitcoin as a narrative, Bitcoin as a voting block, Bitcoin as kind of a community and institution, I think it's doing extremely well. So, day to day, there's a lot of volatility, there's a lot of fear, but awareness of Bitcoin's going up, knowledge of Bitcoin's going up, respect of Bitcoin's going up, liquidity of Bitcoin's going up. The Bitcoin startup ecosystem, like Swan and many others, are getting better. They're getting more well funded. They're becoming more successful. They're finding more product market fit. And yeah, there's a lot of things we got to work through, but this is like a journey of 100+ years. So, and if it's not, then I think Bitcoin's going to fail, and I think we all have to accept that that's potentially an outcome. I'm still pretty optimistic despite that being a potential. So on the road to a new paradigm, there's going to be a lot of volatility. There's going to be a lot of confusion, but I think when you look at Bitcoin and its potential, it's just mind-boggling. And the best way that I can describe it, I think I first said this on Natalie's podcast. But Bitcoiners loves talking about infinity divided by 21 million. But if Bitcoin's a better system, then infinity will get bigger as well, because right now we're hampered by how bad the fiat system is right now, and the fiat system is blocking human potential. So if Bitcoin unlocks that and amplifies that, then infinity actually gets bigger. So it's hard to grok what that means, and and how to express that in BTC terms. But I just think we're super early, and take advantage of the crab market. Stack as much as you can before more people get clued in.
Yeah, it reminds me of the quote, like scarcity in the money creates abundance everywhere else, right? Whereas abundance in the money does the exact opposite. And I think you're right. I mean, it's exciting to think about like what saving would mean to like human productivity, like being able to save again, because you think about its impact on investment, and maybe we'll find better ways to harness energy, and then things get more and more abundant, and it's just this flywheel, right? So it's exciting. That's
Totally.
the long term that potential that we have to like always consider and zoom out, stop thinking about the price so much. And I think I love some of the things you listed, because going back 4 years, I mean, it's just night and day in terms of awareness, education, the products that we have available, the companies that are building, the infrastructure, even like regulatory clarity, things like that. I mean, it's all been positive when you zoom out. And so I just expect that trend to continue. So yeah, CK, I think that's all I have, man. I really enjoyed talking to you. This was fun. Where can people like find your work if they want to, if they're not aware of you already, where can people find you? Let them in.
A lot more quiet these days now that I'm not helping run a media company. But I'm still relatively active on both Twitter and on Nostr. So you can find me at Nostr at @CK_Snarks. It's here on the screen. Sorry, on Twitter, and then on Nostr, look up @CK. I think I'm lucky enough to have the most prominent @CK out there. But you can find my Nostr pretty easily if you're there. And then, lastly, really want to encourage people, go to hrf.org, check out what we're doing, check out the Financial Freedom Report. That's financialfreedomreport.org. Subscribe to that. And yeah, I mean, I think that HRF is pushing forward some really, really impactful narratives for Bitcoin. When someone is going to, have whatever reason they're opposed to it, you can talk about, hey, someone in Burma was escaping the junta, and the only way they got their value without having to leave it all is selling it all for Bitcoin and taking their Bitcoin with them. Like these kind of narratives, it's hard for people to push back on, hey, this is actually important and this works. And it is working right now. This is the most like ironclad narrative. So check out what we're doing. A lot of stuff on our website. We're pushing forward stories all the time. Follow Alex Gladstein. Yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah, I can agree more. And hopefully I'll see you this month at the conference. So thanks for joining, man. We're gonna have
see me in Nashville, and then in LA later this year.
Pacific Bitcoin. So Human Rights Foundation is going to be in Pacific Bitcoin. Go follow their work if you're not familiar with them. They do great work, and I can't agree more with what CK is saying. It's very hard to refute, these case studies of people on the ground using Bitcoin as a tool of economic empowerment. When there's a critic, when you hear it directly from somebody's mouth, there's not much they can say back. So thanks for all your work, and we're gonna have you back soon. Okay, take it easy, my friend. So yeah, I mentioned Pacific Bitcoin. That's October 18th and 19th. As you guys probably know, that's the festival that we put in beautiful Santa Monica. If you use the promo code Signal, you'll get 10% off. And if you use Bitcoin, you'll get an additional 21% off. So go check it out. We're always listing speakers pretty much like every week. So go check out the speakers we have come in and some of the workshops and parties. And speaking of parties, there's also the Pleb party in Nashville at Bitcoin 2024. That's thrown by our friend Anders. It's at an amazing venue, open bar, food, music. It's literally 12 hours of straight partying at this place. It's Thursday, July 25th. So grab your tickets now at plebpartynashville.com. Go through this QR code. I've been to Pleb parties in other places. They are very fun. Anders knows how to throw a party. And so we're proud to be sponsoring that. So go to plebpartynashville.com. And thanks everyone for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed that show with CK. I'm sure I did. So go like it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. That helps us get the message out. Leave a comment. Let me know how we can improve and what guests maybe you want on the show in the future. Got another great guest lined up. I think we're doing our quarterly update with VJ and Brady and myself. So that's going to be exciting. So yeah, thanks for listening as always. And until next week, I'm out.